Okay, great.
Hmm.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Rocket Dollar webinar. We are very happy to bring Dana Dunford from Hemlane and the property management company. The reason why we do these webinars is just because, in general, there happens to be a lack of awareness, not only with what people can do with their self-directed IRA, but also what's available when they start using their self-directed IRA. And of course, there's a lot of ins and outs that people need to be aware of. So with that, I just want to turn it over to you, Dana. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience.
Yeah, great. Hi, everyone. My name is Dana Dunford here with Hemlane. And our mission here is to provide property management to the everyday person. And self-directed IRAs are obviously something that is hopefully well understood from those here participating in the webinar. But to many others, they haven't been educated about it. And once you do understand how much you can leverage something like a self-directed IRA for your future and for your financials, suddenly you can get your money to work for you. And then the question is, if you invest in real estate and when you do, how do you get it to work for you even better? You cannot change the purchase price, what you purchased it at. Interest rates are going to be basically based on the market. And so the real question is your operating expenses and how do you manage those and how do you leverage technology to help you purchase more properties and purchase them from anywhere. And so that was really why we built Hemlane, is to provide an alternative to traditional property management where you're still using licensed support for all the activities. But it combines it with technology to provide you with a transparent platform to view how your properties are performing and for you to be able to invest anywhere and then get access to the folks on the ground, the licensed support, whether it is a leasing agent or a handyman or an electrician to help do the work for you. And so that's really what we're here today to do. We are a nationwide company. So we're managing over 20,000 rentals across the nation and really have a customer-first, customer-centric approach to property management.
Great, excellent. So I understand you brought some slides today, right? We could jump right into that. And I'm probably going to have a lot of questions for you. So just bear with me as I'm trying to understand how to use you guys with an IRA investment for property.
Yeah, great. And I'll have some questions for you too, of what you guys have seen on the Rocket Dollar side, as I think it's very helpful for folks here listening to this. So just to begin with hybrid property management, we believe that this is not only the future of property management, but also a way to maximize your cash flow. And that is combining, obviously, technology with humans to make your return on your investment better. More money into your self-directed IRA means more money to go purchase more properties and get your money working for you. So just a little bit about what I want to talk about today with you, Nick, is first deciding to invest in real estate. Kind of what are some of those decisions that you'll make, especially on the self-directed IRA side. Then I want to talk about the rules, because you cannot manage your properties yourself, as you know. And so we should definitely give some stories about that and lessons learned. And then go into a little bit about maximizing your cash flow, how to do that, how Hemlane helps you do that, and then repeat and build your portfolio. I always tell investors the most difficult thing is getting your foot in the door, purchasing your first property. A lot of times folks overthink it and say, oh, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what market to go into. Once you get your first one, even if you've made a couple mistakes, it makes it where you can iterate and make it that much better. And so just getting started with your self-directed IRA, just going out there and putting a timeline of when you're going to purchase your first property, you can always improve from there, but the first one is most difficult. And then you can basically repeat your process and improve it over time. And so I think it's really important, like to kind of take that leap into purchasing properties if you haven't before, because you'll definitely see the value of it. So the first thing is decisions with it, investing in real estate. This is probably a question for you, Nick. If you were to purchase an investment property, where would you purchase that?
Honestly, I would really want to go back in time and make my purchase. I have no idea where I'd buy right now. So we're out here in Austin, and we've been here for about 10 years, and we've just seen this market explode.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would look for the next Austin, right? But going about doing that, I just am not familiar with any of these types of metrics. So I might just put money into like a fund or some kind of thing that's syndicated until I actually know what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
But if you can tell me, like, what should I be looking for?
Yeah, great question. So this is something where there's almost this analysis paralysis, I think, and it happens at the starting point when you first think about putting money into a self-directed IRA. And then also if you decide to do real estate, then like where do you actually physically purchase this property? And that is totally true and real. To your point, if I'm not sure what to do, then maybe I don't take that leap of faith of, hey, let me purchase a property. Everyone's telling me that purchasing it on my own and being able to maximize that cash flow is advantageous to me. And so you kind of go back and forth. And then when you have too many decisions or you don't know what decision to make, you actually never take action,
That's
right? You
absolutely
usually
true.
take action on things as a human where you know exactly what the answer is. It is much easier to take action. And
Yeah.
so buying close to home or buying out of state, one thing I would say is it's a personal decision of where you want to go, but it's changed in the past 5 years. Historically, it would be very hard to purchase an investment property out of state. You didn't have technology to go and look at where to purchase and get the data and numbers on it. Today, the Bureau puts out great numbers about population growth and where our population's growing. If you're in real estate, you want it in a stable area. Like you don't want to go to some small town that's oil and gas, because if oil and gas goes under, that property, right, could depreciate.
Yeah.
And you
That
could
used to be Houston
yeah,
years
yeah.
ago, right?
And that's why you want diversification. They say Fed, Eds, and Med, which is like if they have government there, if they have a hospital, and if they have education, like a college system, so that it is going to be a much more stable environment to invest in. So like at the kind of macro city level, that would be something to look for. And it also might be something personal where you say, hey, I found 5 markets of where I would want to invest and start building a portfolio. And it's actually kind of fun because you can research these things. It's great dinner conversations to ask people. But then you might say, hey, I have 2 different places I might want to invest. One is maybe Bakersfield. Nick, I know you have some background there. And the other might be outside of Austin. And maybe a third place that you looked at was maybe, let's just say, Ocala, Florida. And you might not know which one to go to and have kind of that, I'll go back to that analysis paralysis where you can't make decisions because you don't know which one to do. But now you can break it down and you can say, okay, Ocala, Florida, I'm not going to invest in because I don't know anyone there. It's totally unfamiliar. Okay, now I'm going to narrow it down to Bakersfield, where I have some family, and Austin.
Mhm.
And then you could suddenly make your decisions much better because you might say, oh, Austin, I looked at, tenant landlord law. That might be better than California. And now you can start making objective decisions about where to go. As long as you have those numbers of like population is increasing, it is a place to invest that's pretty steady and stable, right? So that's the first thing to do. Then it's where do you buy and what neighborhood? I definitely recommend having someone walk down that street, talk to real estate agents, like obviously do your diligence from that perspective. But the second part of it is also you can do a lot of diligence online. Google is a great resource where you can drill down and see like, hey, do they already have a Whole Foods and Starbucks there? Is it already a place that's kind of established and kind of steady and it may not be changing? Or is this the type of neighborhood where I see there's like a local grocery store that's healthy foods, there's a yoga studio, all these trends that, even the big companies or like the big retailers like the Whole Foods and the Starbucks and the Targets are doing research on. Maybe you find a couple of those things. Wow, this neighborhood looks like it's doing really well. One of those may be coming in. That may be a sign of, okay, now this might be a neighborhood that I consider. And so you don't necessarily have to be there, but if you can break it down and follow these types of processes, then you can know with confidence there that, or like reduce any sort of risk associated with, did I purchase in the right area? And so that's kind of why I have this balance here of like, it's going to be a personal decision. It depends on where you live today. But if you're saying that anywhere where I live, buy close to home, there's no good investments there, you're just not finding them compared to somewhere else, I would encourage you to also look out of state, because there's doing that upfront research, because people these days are pretty lazy. They just want to click buttons and get money to work for them. If you do just a tiny bit of research, you can see it's a lot better for your investment in the long term, and you'll beat others in the game. And that's what self-directed IRAs are all about, of like, hey, it takes a little bit more work, but there's a lot more reward and payoff for it.
That's
And
right.
yeah, so then the other thing would be on the management side of, should I self-manage or use a property manager? And this is something that we're here to talk about today, because you cannot self-manage it. You can't go in there and do the repairs yourself, develop the property, do the renovations yourself. And so this is really what we're going to dive into, is you do need to use property management solution. But with technology, thanks to technology, there's new solutions out there that you can use, where you can still have transparency into how your portfolio of investments are doing, but you don't have to do any of the work, right? And so that's really the conversation that we're going to have today, and how that works. So Nick, I'm going to pass this over to you. I want to hear about, from your guys' side, you see it probably much more often than I do. On the self-directed IRA side, what are some of the questions that you guys get associated with property management?
So I am on the phones a lot, along with Tristan and Brendan as well sometimes. So the questions that we get, will have prospective members call in and ask if they can purchase property using IRA money and after-tax money, or if they can purchase, like, do an earnest deposit, right, to hold the property with after-tax money and then purchase it with IRA money. So those are no-nos. If you wind up doing that, and we're not in a position to say don't do it or you can't do that, what happens if you do that is that's a red flag for the IRS to come in and look at your IRA and say, oh, you're commingling funds now. You
Yeah.
have a distributable event, which means whatever you have in your IRA that you made that investment with is now considered taxable. You're going to be, if they're going to force a distribution, the worst case scenario, they'll force a distribution, and you're going to be responsible for the taxes at whatever tax rate you're going to be at, including penalties, right? So those are one aspect of what we get. The other one is, the other few, I guess, could be financing. The financing is different for purchasing a property. You can only do a non-recourse loan, right? And there's not a whole lot of banks that would do a non-recourse loan. Those rates are usually going to be higher than what a conforming or non-conforming rate is going to be. And that's because the structure of the loan is really only on the property that you're purchasing, right? So that's really the only thing the bank can do, is come in and take that property. They can't go after any of your other assets. So do you have any questions after that, Dana? That was kind of a lot to go
Yeah, no, I
over.
think that was great. I think some of it would be on the repair and renovation side. So, if you're working with a
Yeah.
hybrid model, you're obviously going to get more cash flow, right? Your property management fees are lower. And you're going to be saving a lot. We'll talk about that a little bit more on just repairs in general through troubleshooting and best in class practices of things. But I guess my question would be like, okay, now that you have also this additional cash flow in doing repairs, and let's just say you purchase a property and you say, hey, I could increase the rent by an extra $200 if I paid to this, put this countertop in and stuff like that. Sort of, and the expenses and revenue have to flow through the IRA. What are folks doing from that perspective? And from a contractor perspective, finding those folks and using that money and getting it to work for them. And then also, like, how much money are they holding in their account for the operations associated with the property management side?
Right. So they might be holding 10 to 20 or 30%, right? But it also depends on what the value of the property, how much was used to purchase it. Because if you're going out and buying a $500,000 home, what you're going to have on deposit could be enough if it's 20% or 10% to do whatever kind of repairs are going to be around, right? Versus if you purchase a property that's 200,000, you might have to have a higher percentage, just depending on what goes wrong that you have to repair. And you did mention something that completely slipped my mind. You cannot work on the property yourself, right? So that's another IRS no-no, which could wind up with a prohibited transaction from the IRS. So anything that you wind up doing with the IRA, as it's invested in the property, the money has to the IRA money always has to pay for the repairs, and you can't work on it yourself. You have to hire somebody else to do it. So generally speaking, what an investor will do is go and try to find a contractor if they don't already have somebody that they can call on. And I don't think they have a whole lot of, I guess, technology centered property management companies like what you guys have. Right? They'll have to call somebody locally, or if
Yeah.
they can't get a hold of somebody that they know, what do? They're kind of in a bind.
Yeah, no, I hear you on that. And actually, I'd love to talk about and actually deep dive into some of that repair coordination. So kind of as you mentioned, like the revenue and expenses must flow through the IRA. So when you're looking at property management and alternatives, you need to make sure it goes to your account that you have on file, right? It can't go to your personal account. I think this
That's right.
commingling of funds, it's really important to actually have technology in a record showing, hey, everything is going to this one account and things are completely separated. Like I don't even have my personal bank account in a system like Hemlane. Everything is automated and going to the right account and being overseen through the platform. So I think that is really important. I've seen it with folks with like, Apple Pay or whatever it is, where like they accidentally use the wrong bank account to or a credit card to make a purchase. You see that a lot of times happen with employees where like they have their work credit card and then their personal one, and something like that happens. And so it's really important here to like use a system and tools or a traditional manager where it's like, here's the only account you have. You only have access to this IRA account. There's nothing else that you have access to. And that helps make sure that you just totally eliminate the commingling of funds. And then the other thing is also having that same account where there's only one account set up. So when you're paying a general contractor or anyone like that, it is going directly from that account. Like there's no other options for you. And that's something that we've been really big at with Hemlane, of saying like, hey, you have this account in there, and this is the only bank account attached to this property, to make sure that you never commingle funds and every payment that is made is through that account.
Yeah.
Have you ever had with it in the bank account setups questions on that of payments and paying contractors and concerns with that? Kind of what are some of the tips and tricks you've seen?
So what we would normally say is, so we have two different types of accounts. The best, I guess, the ideal situation is that you have an account tied directly to it. So a bank account, which would, in our case, be an IRA LLC type account, because you can have funds directly sent to that particular account. Direct custody can be a bit clumsy, and we can get into the differences, the specific differences on those. But generally speaking, the members that have our IRA LLC account, it's more fluid. because you can have this ideal setup where everything is extracted and deposited directly to the custodian account,
Mhm.
and as much human error as you can eliminate with software, right? Because we have seen mistakes happen. There's just no way to prevent 100% of what people will do. So it can be a pricey, I guess, correction process if you wind up doing something incorrectly.
Yep. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. The other thing you mentioned is a third party must be hired for repairs. And so I definitely think this is a huge one of no matter how much you want to go into the place and there's a quick cleaning that needs to happen or a repair that needs to be made, like cross your T's and dot your I's. And it's smart because you should be more passive on your property. I think the biggest thing I've noticed with property management is people don't value their time. Let's just say you go out to a property. I mean, if you're a lawyer and you're billing $700 an hour, like an hour of your time is a lot. And so making sure that you really make that distinction of when someone's going out to do anything and touch that property, it is someone who is licensed, third party, and you're able to go through that. One kind of tip that I have also, and something that we've learned at Hemlane, is so we basically have we have repair coordinators who are trained specially in repairs, but we also have kind of these assist chatbots that help reduce on-site repair visits. And so this brings more cash, obviously, into your IRA, like your custodian account, just by saying, like, if a tenant puts in a repair request of like, hey, my garbage disposal's not working. It's like, did you press the reset button? Did you doing all of these troubleshooting things?
Mhm.
We found that we were able to close 7% more requests just by having some really best in class practices like that, that don't increase liability at all on the tenant. Like, you're not going to put them on a ladder or anything like that. But making sure that they're doing some troubleshooting before you send someone out to do the repairs. So we
Yeah,
found that to be incredibly helpful. And this is obviously third party, not you doing this. It's a third party working and setting up these processes.
right. That's great. So we did have a question come in. Just they were asking if you would be able to do the development on a vacant property that they purchased. They want to do a self storage build out. So I don't know if you'd be able to make a referral or something like that.
Oh, you mean for the development. So yeah, that's a great question. On the property management side, we will do anything that's not a large renovation. So anything
Mm,
that's a capital expense would have to be referred out by third party that or the real estate agent we connect you to. A lot of times they have their own general contractors in the area and developers that who can help with things. We primarily focus on the repair side. That's a great question.
that makes sense. And do you do anything besides residential properties, or is it only residential?
We do residential and then multifamily. On
Okay.
the commercial side, folks have used Hemlane for commercial. The one thing that doesn't work that great with the commercial is the leasing. So finding
Mm,
and placing a tenant. You would want to go to an agent who uses like a LoopNet or some sort of Crexy or some other type, or CoStar, like any type of additional listing website for commercial properties.
gotcha.
Yeah, but what the property management side is fine. We actually have quite a few customers. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but have both commercial and residential on the platform.
Perfect.
Yeah, great. This was actually a question, Nick, I had for you.
Mm,
So for us, we use a network of service professionals, and this is really a hybrid tip. So like we're always sending someone out who's licensed for their trade, insured for their work. Bonded is a little bit more tricky to get. Not every contractor is licensed, insured, and bonded. But the first two, the licensed and insured, are really important. One of my questions for you, Nick, and I don't know if you can answer this, but there's handymen, and by definition, handymen are basically contractors, but they're not licensed. That's the definition of a handyman versus a general contractor. Usually they have insurance. Like if you have a good
mhm.
handyman, they're going to carry some insurance. But the definition for self-directed IRA, I kind of wonder with that, do they have to be licensed? Or could you send out a handyman who's a complete third party? And as long as they're not a family member that falls in that like lineage diagram you guys have,
Right.
could you send out that handyman saying, hey, they are a third party and this is their profession?
There's really nothing that would prevent you from using a handyman or a contractor or making your own decision with that. As far as I know, you certainly don't want to use a relative or anybody that's closely related to you, because that would have disqualified person's involvement.
Mhm.
So you can use, basically anybody, but obviously it's your retirement account and it's your assets. So you definitely want to make sure that whoever you're using is really good at what they're doing and they have the insurance and all the other credentials to back it up. And I was going to ask you the same thing. How do you guys actually choose? Do you just go and see if they're licensed and insured and bought it, or just
Yeah, it is really hard to get the bonded. Like, definitely we want that as well. For
mm,
us, it's the license and insurance, because like you're not going to send someone out for plumbing or electrical work that like isn't licensed for that trade. There's just too much risk with it. But there's a huge level of variability with someone who's licensed. So by definition, if they're licensed, like they've gone through that checklist process of saying, hey, I know enough about this that I've like basically passed a test, got a license, gone through the training of it, right? But then there's a bigger thing that goes with it of just working with people in general. And so there's a lot like tradesmen, and what we've noticed with them is one that obviously there's too much work. There's a supply and demand imbalance. And so then the
mm,
question is, of the folks you're using, what is the price associated with their work? What is their quality associated with their work? And you're trying to balance that constantly. And so that's the big thing we balance, is not, are they licensed and insured, but balancing after they're licensed and insured, what is the quality and what is the price, and how do we win on both of those? And there's a balance between that. Like, we're not going to have the cheapest person, because usually the cheapest person shows up 10 hours late, doesn't show
yeah,
up, you have to reschedule, they do the work, but the bare minimum, not to tell you like what might be the long-term risk, and call you up on that. And so it's a relationship, right? It's a relationship with these service professionals. For us, they want to know that they're going to get paid. They want to know
mm,
that like we've done the troubleshooting, we know what's going on, we know what we're talking about before they go on site. They want to know someone's going to pick up the call when they're out on site with the tenant. And so all of that is really important. And once a service professional starts working with us for any of those repairs, what they realize is like, okay, Hemlane's always going to pick up that phone for us. They're always going to, before we go out, they're going to tell us what's the make, what's the model of the appliance, what's exactly going on, what have they done troubleshooting on, what do they think may be the problem, so that they can already have the right tools and potentially parts and materials in their truck ready to go. And so a lot of that on the relationship side is super important, to just make sure that you are able to work with the best contractors. Because a lot of these contractors, if you're like Joe Smo calling them and have no
mhm,
idea how to do a repair and this and that, getting their business or sending them out to a property and then, not understanding their pricing and getting into like a phone war on that and things like that, it's just not very professional. And so I think having professionalism in order to work with the best of the best is super important, from that perspective of working with service professionals every day.
right. Then that sounds like a high level of professionalism and commitment that you guys have. So that's fantastic. And I have heard horror stories. I haven't been myself involved anywhere. You do a renovation, right? And it's a renovation that just takes forever. Um, whatever materials are on back order, and the person who's supposed to be doing it just can't be bothered to show up. So as long as you can avoid those things, then you're in good hands, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, definitely. Um, and what else was I going to say with it? As far as working with folks, you definitely want the repeat business. So like once you start working with someone and they're good, if you continue to work with them, they're going to be even higher level of quality because you become such a certain percentage of their monthly income. And so I think that's important also in the equation. And so, yeah, just coordinating through a repair professional. So we have repair coordinators. This is different than obviously the initial troubleshooting, who actually go through and really take the time and effort to schedule with tenants, have that professionalism. So you can make sure that you're out of that day-to-day management. And that you're not having to do the scheduling, coordinating, talking to the service professional. We just have your threshold of like, at what point do we call for approval, this and that. We just have that information on file, and then we can take it from there.
Nice.
So great. Let's talk about maximizing your cash flow. So then the whole question comes down to, how do you do it? And how do you make sure once you have a property that your property management is working for you, not against you, and you're able to get more money into your account. And so software can provide, we have actually a report and a study done on this. Software can provide about 70% time savings, whether it's you or a property manager using it. It can do everything from helping with lease renewals and setting rental rates to reminding on payments to collecting the rent. I always tell people no news is good news. If you don't get an alert in our system that your tenant is late, it means they've paid everything on time. And so really making sure that you have software in place to do that. Whether you're using a hybrid model and have made that decision where you're using software and you're controlling that plus your local team, or if you're using a traditional manager, making sure they have something in place as well. The other thing is local support when you need it. So across the country, this is example actually in Virginia, but we have agents who can go out there and do things that you need. So for example, Kate here, she reviews applications, lease preparation, move in, move out, property showings, turnover repair coordination. She provides a list of service professionals. And so you can basically find these individuals on our platform and work with them when you need them. And that helps really make sure, as you had mentioned, that you differentiate between what am I doing versus what am I hiring a professional to do. This is one I want to ask you about, Nick. Self-guided tours and technology on showings. So doing rental showings. What are your thoughts on that? And what do you think are some of the risks? And would you do it if you had a rental property? Would you do a self-guided tour?
I would prefer not to, especially if it was in my IRA. I mean, there's things you can do, and we would make the, I guess if you equate it to being the maintenance person that we were talking about earlier, or like an office employee, right? So you can shuffle papers and you can send emails and do things like that.
Yep.
But you wouldn't be able to go and fix a sink, obviously. Now, showing the property, I'm just paranoid. So it might just be like my neuroses that wouldn't allow me to do it. Um, and even on the webinar, it's not something I would say that might be okay, because in all reality, it really just takes one auditor to sit down with you and have a conversation that you don't want to have anyway.
Yeah.
So just avoid it. If you can, just have somebody else do it.
Yeah. So I agree. You shouldn't do the self-guided tours yourself or anything like that. Here's one thing that's really interesting. I used to be really against saying, hey, have a lockbox on site to do rental showings. I used to be totally against it. And there were two reasons for it. One, having an agent there make sure that the tenant knows it's not fraud. Like if you have a showing agent, make sure that they know it's not a fraudulent, like a scam or anything. And then the second one was also being able to sell and close the tenant on how great the place is. We spoke with our licensed agents and basically did a pilot where they had self-guided tour lockboxes and we had them for our leasing coordinators. And here's what is really interesting the moment we implemented them. We saw that we were able to reduce the turnaround time on having a property vacant, where basically you're not making any money on the property, right? No tenant is paying rent.
Right.
we are able to reduce it by a week. And here's how. With a self-guided tour and lockbox, you can have the tenants go and we were able to reduce the leasing fee. Second, you're able to have the tenant just go, and if they inquire today about your property, you'll have a leasing coordinator or a leasing agent say, great, here's the lockbox code, it's a single-use code. Go tour it, and they would do, we use biometric information to verify the tenant's identity to make sure they are who they say they are, like they hold their ID up to their face, sort of like Airbnb does. Make sure that they are who they say they are. Then we give the lockbox access, and the code just works once. So they just use it once. And at the end of the showing, we can ask them how it went. And this helped because a lot of times, a lot of real estate agents, whether they're a leasing agent or a property manager, they're really busy.
Yeah.
And so going from property to property, a tenant wants to cancel and show up an hour late. It's a lot of administration, and then also cost, right? Additional cost to you because you're the one paying for that service to get it. And so we found that if, Nick wants to see the property today, we could make it where he could see it today, and we could make it safe and secure through that biometric information and verifying his identity. We could get him there that day. We could get his application in 4 to 5 days faster than otherwise if we did the showing on Saturday with an agent, and potentially we would have lost him because he had seen another place. And so this is a really interesting thing about hybrid, of using technology and still using the agent and the leasing coordinator to help with this process as a third party. However, you yourself are not having to get involved in it. And so it's food for thought, because this is something that we piloted starting back in July of last year. And then we just looked at the numbers and the success and the factors of what owners were saying of how do I use license support, coordinators, and lockboxes to get the best experience. And so far we found that has worked really well.
That's awesome. We do have a few questions coming through, so we'll get to those in a little bit. Just want to let everybody know. And obviously time management, I mean, time is the most valuable commodity that all of us have, right? And I was going somewhere with what I was going to say, had to do with, people who are not technologically inclined, right? Because they exist. Maybe they have a flip phone, or they don't own a computer, or some other form of non-technological capability. Is it too terribly difficult to use your system if they're not great at technology?
So if you don't have a flip phone, as long as you have something connected to the internet, you can use Hemlane.
Okay.
We have actually closer to you where you live. We have a tenant in Georgetown. So that's kind of, isn't that right outside of Austin?
It's right next door, yeah.
Okay, well, we've got quite a few
But
tenants.
I'm on the suburbs, so yeah, it's real close to me.
So maybe even closer, you can go visit him. He's 96 years old.
Oh,
and he uses Hemlane to pay his rent. And usually if we have a tenant that is that old, we tell them, like, use your children to set up the system. And he said, nope, I can use Facebook, I can use Hemlane. And so we tell people, if you can use Facebook or Instagram, you can use Hemlane.
Okay.
That's basically the guideline that we have provided, is if you could use that, you could use Hemlane. And so we do try to make it really easy for tenants. We do make it where, like, on their phone, they can use their phone for paying rent, asking questions, submitting repair requests. They can also just call us if they have a repair request to submit. They can call our 24/7 line. We'll go ahead and get that submitted right away for them. And so from that perspective, we really do take a lot of pride in making sure that we have a good system in place. And then also just like a really good user experience. On the owner side, you need a little bit more, because you'll be like approving things in the system. So there's a little bit more to do than I would say what a tenant has to do. But at the same time, if you say, hey, even if you have a flip phone, if you have a computer, you can go in and follow a task list, you should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, this is just kind of like a quick overview of what we offer, where you basically have that local support, licensed obviously for their trade and what they're doing. You also have these tools online where you can see everything. So it's very transparent. And then obviously the 24/7 repair coordination to take that off of your plate. And so I kind of want to leave it with a story and then open it up for questions. And this is just giving you an example of David. He's a San Diego investor. So he lives in San Diego, and he doesn't obviously want all of his eggs in one basket. So if he were to invest in the San Diego biotech and pharma index, this is what it would look like over a certain period of time, right? That's not diversification, not diversifying. He does far better through the S&P 500 and across the nation. So over the same point in time, this is what the S&P 500 looks like versus that San Diego buying in his backyard type mentality with stocks. And so when you think about real estate, you can really use your self-directed IRA and also your management solution to your advantage. You can live here in San Diego or Austin or wherever you want to live, and you can invest anywhere. You can basically go and purchase properties anywhere without having any limiting factors. And so that's like the one thing I want you to take away from this is dream big, think big, and make your money work for you from that perspective. So I will stop there and leave it open for questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dana. So I'm going to go to the Q&A right now. So get ready for rapid fire, but I'll try to keep it slow so we can stay on the same page. So how does Hemlane handle inspections, checking for smoke detectors, bathroom seals to prevent leaks, furnace, AC roof, etc.? Great
question. So we partner with a company that does inspections. So you can go ahead and just request that inspection online. A lot of time it's done during that move out where it's a super intensive one. They also do annual inspections too, but they actually send an inspector out there, a home inspector. And the home inspector does what they consider a rental inspection. A rental inspection is different than like a sale inspection. They're not checking as much of the foundation and things like that. They're not jumping on the rooftop, but they are checking things like the smoke detector, are the faucets working, this and that. And then you'll have an entire report that's provided of here's all the things that would be recommended to do for turnover. And then you can basically choose what you want to do with obviously that advising what you should do and what are the risk factor with things. And obviously with your IRA, like I would just recommend being a little bit more conservative. If something is said to be done, go ahead and like get it done by that third party professional.
Yeah, right. Thanks. So this is I think it's involving maybe one of your not favorite tenants. The question is, pre-eviction is not enough. How is full eviction handled?
Yeah, great question. So with pre-eviction, so let me tell you exactly how we work through evictions. So with an eviction, it's obviously a point in time where a tenant is not paying their rent. Now, if you actually talk to tenants and you look at the other side of it, no tenant wants to be evicted, right? Like that's not a tenant doesn't wake up in the morning and say they want to be evicted. And so the real question is, well, why aren't they paying their rent? What are the facts and what happens there? So we have something called pre-eviction. And the reason we call it pre-eviction is because it's cheaper initially, and that's increasing your cash flow, where we have a mediator come in and really understand the situation. There might be something where you find out that they were on vacation, didn't have their phone on them, and they are going to pay rent. We've had situations where this is a professional tenant and, oh gosh, this is going to go to court and they're going to fight something. But whatever it is, having a third party come in to actually mediate it is incredibly important. And the reason you want that is a mediator is a lot cheaper than a lawyer. If you've ever worked with lawyers, they have rates starting at $300 an hour, and those hours add up really quickly. And so having a mediator get the facts, understand what's going on is incredibly helpful. The next step is if mediation does not get the tenant to pay rent within that 48 to 72 hours, if that rent is not going through, the next step is serving the notice. And so we have a process server go out and serve that notice to the tenant to say you have X number of days to pay rent or quit. The number of days is based on your state. Like there's some states there's 7 days, some dates it's 3 days. So whatever it is, they're going to serve that notice. And at that point, you keep the system open in Hemlane for rent to be paid until then. What is really interesting about our stats and data is 87% of eviction cases are closed at that moment in time, like after that notice, where the tenants have paid, or they've said, hey, we can't pay, keep our security deposit, we're out tomorrow type thing. Let's do a lease termination. Why is that advantage? Why is that better for you than going straight to a court case and getting a lawyer involved right away? Well, it's a lot cheaper for you, first of all. And two, it's dealing with the situation and understanding the facts before you just immediately go to a lawyer. Now, that's 87% of the eviction cases that we get. We track the data. That's never have to go to court. There's obviously that 13% that do have to go to court. That's going to be a much more expensive case. And then in that case, we actually refer you out to a professional lawyer, give you rates, what they do, and then they'll be the ones who help file that, the notice that you've served on the door, they'll file that in the courts and go to court for you. But again, overall, it saves you more money by doing it this way rather than going directly to a lawyer, which we've seen a lot of other alternative property managers do, of just saying, hey, go directly to a lawyer. You know, one call with a lawyer is going to cost the same amount of our total pre-eviction process. And we found much better results that way.
That sounds like it would be preferable if I were in the same situation. A couple more questions, and I mean, it might be a situation where they would have to contact Hemlane directly and ask these questions to get more specifics. And your information is up there, so that's great. So, do you get multiple quotes for high ticket repairs above a certain threshold?
Yep, anything over $500, we get 2 quotes on. And you might just say, hey, I'm going to take that first quote. I don't want a second quote. I don't know how many people do that, but I think it's probably pretty rare. Anything over 500, we do. The reason 500 is our threshold for having 2 quotes is a lot of times what you see, and obviously the numbers vary so significantly based on the region, but you might have something where, you know, it's a service call of $89. And then the person quotes you and says, this repair is going to be $300. Okay. And you might say, hey, I don't want to take that, and I'm going to get a second person out there. Let's just say that second person also has an $89 service call fee. And they come out and they say, great, it's going to be $280. Well, now you've paid 2 service call fees, which is more than that first one. And so what we've seen is from service professionals, especially those that are licensed and insured, is that they do, some have free estimates. Don't get me wrong, some do, especially like roofers and stuff like that. But if they don't have a free estimate, it's always going to cost you more to get additional bids, is what we've seen. And we want to set that expectation of like, hey, we're trying to make sure your cash flow is the highest. Now, if we see trends in an area where we use 2 different plumbers and one is consistently cheaper, don't get me wrong, we're going to send that person out. We don't mark up our repairs. So from our perspective, our incentives are aligned with yours.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And last question that we have so far is, do you offer lease customization if certain clauses need to be included in the lease?
Yeah, you can customize those leases however you want. If you're using our licensed agents, their leases are through their realtor associations typically. If it's like San Francisco, they're going to have a specific, like the apartment association lease. So it depends, but you would definitely customize and put those in there. We also have situations where folks have their own leases. That is totally fine. And then we have partnerships as well for leases for you to prepare.
Okay, perfect. One question that I had was the 24/7 service. Is that more technology oriented, or is that also like a call center?
I hate the word call center.
I know, I don't know what else to call it.
Call center makes me, it sounds like it's like an admin picking up the phone to me.
Yeah.
It's a repair coordination line. And so
Okay.
if you call it, it's someone who knows more about, I call them for even my primary residence when I need like, if my washer the other day filled up, I like called them to understand, like, why isn't it draining water and how do I troubleshoot this before I go and get an appliance repairman out here? So they're specialized in repairs. So you're gonna call them. It's less technology and more humans in there. There's technology
Awesome.
doing anything administrative, but like you still need people. Like for a service professional, they don't want to talk to technology, talk to some chatbot. What they want to do is get on the phone and hear, oh, okay, yeah, this is what happened. Here's what
Hmm.
the appliance is, et cetera. And so we definitely use people for that.
That's absolutely what I was hoping to hear. So a couple other questions came in. Do you cover Florida? I'm assuming that's a yes. You
We
guys do?
do.
Yeah.
We do cover Florida. I think as a rule of thumb of do we have a service professional network there? It's basically any MSA with a population over 100,000. So if you're in a really tiny town in the middle of nowhere, we might not have a service professional network. You would have to bring your own plumber, electrician, appliance repairman, and then we can call them. And so we can do that. Like if you go through our process, we'll let you know whether or not we can cover that area with our own service professional network. And that's just based on making sure that it's quality. We do have investors who come to us and say, oh, I'm in this little town in the middle of nowhere. I didn't follow Dana's recommendation of Fed Ed Zemed in like where I'm investing, which is okay. But then it's like, great, who do you have in that area that is a general contractor, an appliance repairman, et cetera? We would be more than happy to call them and take over that coordination for you and pay out the bills to them. We just need to know who you're using there.
Just some contact information, basically.
Exactly, their contact information. And then also the other important thing is just letting them know that we're the ones calling on behalf of you. And we'll let them know that as well. But we'll mention we're calling on behalf of your property, that we work with you, et cetera, as well.
Okay, great. So we're gonna have one last question, and if you need to get in touch with Hemlane, we have Dana's email right there. There's also contact us on the website. I mean, it's pretty easy to navigate. There's a lot going on the website, though, I will say. Um, so the question is, do you check local regulations to include the latest mandates in leases?
Great question. So yes and no. So yes, at the state level, we do. If you're in an area where there is county ordinances such as like LA, Chicago, San Francisco, Oregon, well, like Portland, Seattle, we would highly recommend using one of our local leasing agents who does follow that and does have a specific lease for that. Because us at like Hemlane's, here's a standard state specific lease, are not going to be able to provide that. And so we do highly recommend that you work with one of our partners who does leases there 24/7 and keeps up to date with those local regulations. And then there's other areas where it's like, hey, the county laws basically follow the state laws, which is most areas. And then you can use the state specific leases that we have. And we do that all through a partnership, by the way, just so you know.
Perfect. Okay. Dana, thank you so much for joining us today at Rocket Dollar. If anybody has any questions, please reach out to Hemlane about the property management that they offer. If you have questions about retirement or investing with self-directed IRAs, give Rocket Dollar a call or send us an email, info@rocketdollar.com. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I learned a lot.
Thanks for having me.